Hey everyone, it's Andrea. Today, we give you a mini geology lesson. A new Star Trek drinking game is born, and we ask the question, what would you do if you saw a godlike race of people? All that and more coming up.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the #1 place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
I'm your co-host, Andrea. Today we're talking Season 3, Episode 4, entitled Who Watches the Watchers? This episode was written by Richard Manning and Hans Beimler and directed by Robert Weimer. It is Stardate 43173.5. When the Enterprise leads a rescue team to a Starfleet outpost that is studying a primitive culture, they inadvertently allow the race a glimpse of their futuristic technology and are mistaken for gods. Wary of violating the Prime Directive, but needing to rescue a wounded Federation officer, Troy and Riker beam down in native garb. Although Riker escapes with a lost member of the science team, Troy is captured by the Mintakans, who have adapted Picard as their god. Shereese, do you have any initial thoughts on this episode?
I do. I actually felt like this episode was what the episode Justice should have been. I feel like this is the do-over of that episode. And I didn't love this episode, but I also didn't hate it. And as I watched it, I was like, okay, yes, this is what Justice should have been. Because that episode was trash. And this episode felt like this is what you were actually going for. What about you?
I didn't think about that at all. I think that's a really great point. I liked this episode. It felt very solid, good Star Trek. That sentence was not my best ever, but like it felt like solidly. It's morning. Okay. It felt like where Star Trek solidly lies, and then these really, really great episodes. It doesn't stand out in my memory as like one of the greats, but again, we're still pretty fresh into Season 3 where the wheels are just starting to like kick up some dirt and get going. I also thought that this episode I thought it was very well written. There were a lot of layers to it. It features like a highly logical race of people. And I love that they're talking about religion, which for many is like illogical. And I was like, ooh, that's like a really cool balance, and I really appreciated the writing in this episode.
Being a religious person, this usually bothers me because in Star Trek and a lot of other shows, but in Trek specifically, they pit intelligence against religion. Like if you are religious, you somehow cannot be intelligent, and that technology displaces God, something like that. And I do feel like that's really narrow-minded and very singular. And I think there's room for more. As much as I love science, which I absolutely do, and I think it helps us so much in our lives and in the world, science doesn't explain everything. Like it doesn't explain love, no matter how many chemicals you can identify that are activated in the presence of a loved one, right? Like it doesn't explain it. And so I do feel like it's a little bit short-sighted to take that view that only unintelligent people can be religious. However, the way it was done in this episode didn't feel insulting. It felt like it was trying to be kind of respectful, which again was like the opposite of Justice, which was trash. So yeah. And I wish that show would just disappear. Like it was an episode, just never was. But
I feel like we need to create several like games out of Trek World. One is my bingo sheet of most punchable faces of Starfleet.
Yes.
2, I think there needs to be like a board game or a card game of some sort of like each card is like the shittiest episodes, like Justice and Too Short a Season and some of those Code of Honor. And it's like you pull the card and then you have to like
go back to the spaces.
Or you have to like take a shot and then try to give us the rewrite idea or something. I don't know.
If you have invented that game, please let us know. Send us an email to info@thetngpodcast.com.
Yeah. Or if you're a game developer, let us know because this needs to happen.
Yes. We'll play it.
I have a little bit of trivia on this episode. The rock formation that was featured prominently in this episode is called Vasquez Rocks. It lays about 30 miles north of Los Angeles. So it's a very convenient site to like travel with all your gear to go film. This famous rock formation features in a million TV shows and movies, but in Star Trek alone, it's in 4 episodes of the original series, 1 episode of TNG, which is this one, 2 episodes of Voyager, 1 episode of Enterprise, 1 episode of Picard, and several of the Star Trek films, including the newest J.J. Abrams iterations, because he wanted to pay homage to this rock formation that features so prominently in like a bunch of Trek universe stuff. So I thought that was kind of cool. I was like, holy crap.
That is neat. Let's hear it, LA. I did not know that at all. And it was a very cool rock formation. It doesn't look specifically like, nothing about it is especially alien. But I think it's just so isolated. It's just like a rock in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing identifiable to say what planet you're on.
Exactly.
And it's way better than that stupid green screen that we had back in season 1.
Why didn't they just film like Tasha Yar's death there instead of the like cat shit planet that's just like green screen and like some dirt? Anyway, so that's Vasquez Rocks. You can look it up. It's near a town called Agua Dulce, but it's about 30 miles north of LA. So if you're ever around there, go check it out. It's mostly sedimentary rock, which is what makes the cool striations in the rock. So it's not good rock climbing. So I'm really bummed about that because I'm like, ooh, I want to go climb Vasquez Rocks. That'd be really cool, but you can't. Not really. Anyway, all right. So that's the trivia for today. Let's just jump in. So the crew is heading to help deliver some goods to an anthropological survey team on Mintaka 3. Kind of a cool planet name. And the anthropologists are watching this like proto-Vulcan society, and they're doing it by observing them via something called a duck blind, which I was like, ooh, what's that? I didn't do a deep dive on it, but I did Google some stuff, and it's basically just like a little structure that looks like it fits in with the environment. So you can be there, but the animals or proto-Vulcans don't know you're there.
It's a hunting hide, and I know it has like a real name, but they were equating it to a duck blind, which is really funny because it's like in the 21st century, do you guys still do duck hunting? Really? But okay, whatever. Like, I think it was an apt comparison. I also thought to myself, I could not be an anthropologist because like I love all the shows on the Nature Channel and all of that. Like, they're beautiful. I love the footage they get of ants and spiders and snakes and all kinds of stuff in the random places all over the world. But there's no way that I could be camping out in these harsh conditions for months and months and months to get like 30 minutes of footage. Like, you couldn't pay me enough to do that. So thank you to all of the people out there who happily do that work, because I totally appreciate it.
You know, I took an anthropology class in college, and I took an archaeology class because I was really interested in archaeology. I was like, ooh, that could be a potential major. Incredibly quickly realized absolutely not for me, because you spend your entire life doing a study on this ancient rock wall that was like a divider between 2 properties. And you're like, great. I spent my entire life studying a rock wall. It's like, 5 feet high and like 15 feet down the road. Like, but like, these things are important to try to determine like how society was functioning prehistorically. But I was like, but it's a rock wall. Like, like, it's just a little like fence between 2 neighbors' houses. Yeah. So I was like, I'm not digging up Triceratops skeletons. Like, I'm out. Anyway, so the crew is heading to drop off this holographic generator because they need to like disguise themselves from the Mintunkans. And the generator in front of the observation post goes out, and there's 2 natives of the society, and they are walking along, and they see the duck blind basically becoming visible. And the father, his name is Liko. He climbs up the rocks and sees the crew members in there, and he sees people like beaming in and out. And he's like, oh my God. I mean, these people are in their Bronze Age. So not even remotely close to like ready for this. And I don't know what your thoughts were. Like, what would you think if you were to see something like that futuristic?
Yeah, I would think I would definitely be scared, and I would probably think I was hallucinating. I wouldn't think it was real. And I think that the assumption of the Mintakans that the people of the Enterprise are gods or magical beings makes all the sense in the world, because how are they just disappearing before your eyes, even despite all the other technology, even despite the tricorders and whatever, because you don't even have a concept of those things. But I think it was really the beam out part that was like, what the, and then also seeing Data, who looks so different. because the humanoids look kind of like the Mintakans. Their foreheads are a little different and their skin's a little lighter, but they look pretty similar. Which is another thing I thought to myself, that if alien life did exist and it came to Earth and it was humanoid in any way, shape, or form, that alone would freak me out. Because what are the odds of that? I feel like the odds are infinitesimal that there'd be another being in the universe that looks humanoid. Like, that's just crazy. So that alone would freak me out.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, if I poked my head into a duck blind and saw some futuristic race, they'd probably look like the Shellyak or something, and I wouldn't even know what I was looking at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like the humanoid thing is a
necessary
device
for actors.
Yeah, exactly.
But not so as realistic as the show is, people.
Yeah.
That part's not super realistic. But anyways, yeah, I would have the same conclusions that they have. I would freak out. I would be trying to make sense of it. But and then, he's seeing all of this and Data's like, uh-oh. And then
I love that Data's the one who's like, Commander.
Anybody know this guy? Anybody? No? No? We don't know this guy. Who is this guy? And then he like gets shocked and then falls like almost to his death. And I was like so shocked. I did not see that coming. I thought they would be like, oh no, and like maybe stun him with a phaser or something and erase his memory. That's what I thought would happen. But when he fell and like landed at the bottom of the rocks, I was like, oh my gosh. And his like legs all crooked. I was like, this is pretty violent for a Trek episode.
Yeah.
And like, the daughter runs over and it's just like, no. I was like, gosh, this is awful. Like, and then I also thought, but now he can't tell their secrets and like freak out his whole people.
Yep.
I did not remember this episode. Let me just start with that. As I was watching, I was like, what's happening here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was really violent and like so scary to see his legs all crooked. And so I was like, ooh, God. So the good doctor, as she is, beams him up for medical attention immediately. And she gets to him in like 2 seconds. So she must have like Superwoman jumped out of the duck blind down the like 60 feet of rocks and landed
just
right
like
next to him.
Crewmen.
Exactly.
I was like, why did he jump out the window? What's going hello? Where's that guy going?
I know, that's what I was thinking too. That's what I was thinking. I mean,
gonna blow? Why did he jump out and roll down the hill?
I thought the same thing. I was like, 2 people got electrocuted and everybody else just kind of went like, but this dude was like, I am out of here. Like jumps out the window,
jumped out the window,
dropped 10,000 feet onto the floor and was like, never seen again. Yeah. I was like, what the fuck is that dude doing? But so Beverly, superhero, like Wonder Woman, jumps down, beams him up immediately to sickbay. And Captain Picard comes into sickbay minutes later and is like, Beverly, I need to speak with you. And she comes in like, I already know what you're going to say. And I love that we get the push and pull between Doctor and Captain again. We didn't get a ton of that with Pulaski. We got some push, but it was more like, let me do my job and get the fuck out of my way. But Beverly gets a little bit more like personal.
Discussion.
Yes. She gets a little bit more personal with him. And I like that. So he's like, she said, it was either let him die or bring him up and like save him.
Patch him up.
Yeah. And he says, well, why didn't you just let him die? And I love that she argues back that like his injuries were due to them being there. Like he wouldn't have just like fallen and broken his leg and that would have been that. He nearly died because of them.
And I completely agreed with that. It's not like she was walking down the road and then found somebody who was almost dead and then beamed them aboard and totally broke the Prime Directive. It was like he only fell because he looked in the duck blind and got electrocuted. It's 100% Starfleet's fault that he almost died. And it's your duty because you can easily save him and fix his broken leg. That takes no effort from you at all. Like you guys need to fix him. I agreed with that.
I agreed with that also. And I agree with you with agreeing with that. So thank you.
And and like, I think it's pretty clear that the Prime Directive at this point is just a really strong suggestion anyways. It's like the speed limit.
Shereese, by the end of this episode, it's like, it's a side dish. It's not even like, it's like the little side of soy sauce you get with your sushi. That's all the Prime Directive is now.
Yeah, it's gone from a speed limit to a speed bump.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, you could slow down, but you could just keep going.
To a stop sign covered in bushes that nobody sees. Like, that's kind of what it is. Like,
doesn't this just not work with the Prime Direct? Shut up. We're doing it. Okay. All right.
So Captain tells Beverly to wipe his memory and references the Pen Pals episode where Pulaski did the same thing to Sarjenka.
which I loved. I was like, Pulaski gets some props here.
She gets a little mention. She's, Diana Muldaur was already on LA Law, I think, by this point. But I love that Beverly also was like, I'm familiar with Dr. Pulaski. It's like, oh, are we not supposed to bring up the ex-girlfriend?
No, but then she also says, but I don't think it was with that attitude, because the rest of that sentence is, she says, I'm familiar with Pulaski's work, but I'm not as good at it as she is.
Oh, is that what she said?
That's what she said. Yeah. She said, I'm familiar with her work, but I'm not as good at this technique as she is. So hopefully
Clearly, because oopsie. Well, the poor man, Liko, I keep wanting to call him Loki. I'm like, oh, nope, that's the wrong universe. So Liko wakes up in sickbay and hears a conversation between Picard and the others and assumes Picard is a god. Beverly immediately is like, oh shit, and runs over and hyposprays him and puts him back to sleep. And, we cut to him coming to back on the planet. And the procedure is an immediate failure because he wakes up and tells his daughter that, like, I saw this god. His name is Picard. I was on this ship. It goes warp 5 sometimes. Like, he just knew everything. Like, he knew way too much.
Yeah,
I know. He's bald. They tried a hairpiece, but it didn't work. Like, there was just a bunch of information he knew. And like, I thought I was a little disappointed because there wasn't even like a shake it out period where he was like, where am I? How did I get here? He just woke up and he's like, guess what? Like, immediately, like, he knew everything. So that sucks. He's immediately telling everyone. And here's my thought. Does it really break the Prime directive to bring him up and try to wipe his memory and then leave him back down there? Because honestly, we have people on our planet all the time that are claiming that they were abducted by aliens, and everybody writes them off as crazy. So really, I think in a society, you can let the one crazy person do their thing because everybody, they're not crazy, but people assume that they're crazy.
I agree. And I also think that they should erase their memory, though, because that changes the trajectory of a person's life when they're written off as crazy by their entire society.
That is true. Yeah.
So I agree with you in the sense that there's no danger to Starfleet by letting this person keep their memories, because no one's going to believe them anyways. But there is danger to that individual because now they're seen as crazy and disowned by their entire family.
Yeah,
so
you're right.
I do think it's worth erasing their memory. But you're right. In this case, he keeps his memory and everybody believes him. And the reason they believe him, what they just explain in the episode, is that because they're, this really backward society that's so unsophisticated that they kind of believe anything with a really good story. And so that was kind of, again, not super realistic, because even if you only have spears and bows and arrows, you still have common sense. Like, that hasn't changed. And maybe your understanding of the world is different right now than where it will be 100 years from now. But still, if one person's just like, hey, I just saw God like 5 minutes ago. And everyone's like, okay. And at first they did give a little bit of pushback, like, no. But then the daughter was there like, no, I swear he almost died. But then he died, but now he's alive.
Having someone to corroborate your story
makes a big difference.
Big difference. Yes. And the daughter's like, never mind that we were smoking peyote back there. Just listen to what we have to say. But so aboard the ship, I think, well, let me back up. I think you're absolutely right. I did not consider the life that somebody would have after being totally written off by their family and their society. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Thank God you're in charge of things like this, because I would not be good at that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Okay, so back on board the ship, the team is talking about this guy who jumped out the window like Superman. And they're like, we still need to find him. So Riker and Troy, and this is the first time we see this in Star Trek. I'm so excited. They are surgically altered and beamed down to the surface to find the missing researcher.
So cool.
And I love when our main crew are quote unquote surgically altered to look like other aliens. And I think, one, that is a hell of a lot of makeup and like facial things that you have to stick on your actors. So good job, makeup team. Immediately off the bat. Great job.
This makeup job was great, actually. I really like this makeup job. It was
so
really
good. And not only that, but like the hair as well. Like, I'm sure they had to wear wigs or whatever. Amazing job there too. They looked just like everybody else. And it didn't look like Too Short a Season where you had a whole other head attached to your head, so your head was way too
I
big.
believed everything.
I mean, even later in Trek, the episodes were like the episode where Troy wakes up and she's been surgically altered to look like a Vulcan. It's like, damn, they do such a killer job. It looks unbelievable. So they beam down and Liko is running around telling people what they've seen. And I thought that this was somewhat like the writers poking fun of our society where we are right now. But they said, we no longer believe that the stars control our fates and the spirits of the dead haunt the living. And I was like, wow, these are things that a lot of us still believe today. So it's like, wow, what is that saying about where our culture is today? But I really picked that up and maybe thought more about it than I than I needed to.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing that I said earlier. It's like there's room for more than one belief because we as humans, and I guess them as Mintakans, still have this desire to explain the world and how it works.
Yes.
Which is fine. So a lot of things can be explained by science, but not everything. Like friendship can't be explained by science. But maybe you can break it down with psychology or like there's other ways to view the world. And I think that that's fine. And there's definitely room for woo-woo. There's room for stuff in there that's like a little bit off of mainstream. But if there's no other explanations, what's the harm? And that's kind of what I was thinking with this when she was just like, well, we don't believe that anymore, but now you want us to believe these old beliefs. But he's like, but what about these old, and so anyways, they have lots of healthy discussions, which I appreciate because that also makes them more of a society. We talked about last week's episode with the instance of command, or not last week's episode. I don't even remember when that episode was, but
it was a while
whenever
ago.
we did that episode, I was like, that's episode 2. Whenever we did that episode, how that society was like a really real society because everybody had different thoughts and opinions and there was healthy discussions and debates. And that is what makes it feel more real. Unlike Justice, where everyone was just like, we all believe the same thing.
Yeah.
Why would we believe anything different?
Yeah.
And it's just like
overly
no,
simplistic.
Like that.
Yeah. Way over simplification.
And so I like this. And they all end up being convinced, which I think is reasonable as well. Like if someone's really passionate and really believes about something, and he had people to back him up, they're like, all right, so Picard is God and maybe we need to appease him somehow. And then Troy and Riker are just totally trying to like, for lack of a better phrase, cock block and just be like, nah, what are you talking? Nah, that's not true. I think you guys are making that up. And I think that strategy was just not very effective. Like it was a good idea, but it wasn't working. I think they should have changed horses and tried a different strategy to talk to the Mintakans because that whole everything he's saying is false was not working.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, suspicion alert. You've got one of your members of your society saying like all these strange things have been happening. I was taken aboard the ship and I saw all these strange people and all these crazy things, right? And then you have 2 strangers you've never seen before be like, hello, we're travelers. Can we trade with you? I'd be like, trading is closed for today. Okay. Like, till we figure out what the fuck is going on. We are not talking to anybody we don't know. Just, I thought that was really.
And they could have they could have played into that too, because when they first beamed down to the planet, I was thinking they must have consulted with the anthropologists.
You would think.
And have visitors. And if they do, what town did you just come from? How did you arrive? How did you, like, if anyone asks you questions, can you answer those questions? Do you know how to engage with them? So I was like, they must have just interviewed the anthropologist and got some Cribs notes or something about what to do.
Hope so.
But when I hope so, because I mean, you don't just enter a society. Like I wouldn't go to another country and just be very American. I would want to learn about their culture so that way I can communicate effectively. So they could have played into that and been more effective. They could have been like, we're travelers. What is this you're talking about? What strange people? Really? Do you think that was real or do you think that was a dream? Like they could have inserted it a little more subtly instead of just being like, we're travelers and we don't believe anything you're saying. I think you were hallucinating. And so was your daughter. It's just like, why would we believe you people? We don't even know you.
We don't even know who you are.
You? Where'd you come from?
For Troy to be like, what a strange dream you had. It was a dream. It's like, you're pushing this dream thing a little hard, Troy. Maybe subtlety is more your thing. If you really wanted to push hard, you should have had Worf beam down and been, a Mintakan. But so Troy and they're trying to find Palmer, who's the other anthropologist that jumped out the fucking window. And one of the Mintalkans is like, hey, I found this guy. And he's like half conscious, half not. And Troy, thankfully, is thinking quick. And she's like, there's another stranger out here. I found one. And so she leads everybody out, and Riker takes Palmer and gets to the Enterprise. They, have this like ridiculous little chase where Riker is running with Palmer around his shoulders like a fireman carry. And one of the Liko's daughter sees him running off with him, and he's like, wait, right? So it alerts like the Mintalkans to stop following Troy and start getting real and chasing down Riker. And
which I don't think she ever took her measurements.
No, she
the whole
didn't.
reason she wasn't with the rest of the group was because she was like, Father, I need to take my sundial measurements.
Yeah.
And I don't think she ever got those measurements.
We are never going to know what time it was or whatever for that day,
or whatever she was even measuring.
There's going to be a blank entry for that day, because that was one hell of a busy day for the Mintalkans, I tell you what. So Riker is chasing, but he doesn't want to beam away and have the Mintalkans see him, so he's like running behind some rocks and finally gets away. But Troy is found out, obviously, and held captive.
Yeah, that wasn't a super well thought out plan.
No, it was not. It sure wasn't. Why doesn't she run? They had subcutaneous communicators. Why didn't she run behind a rock while everybody was like, caught up in the melee, right?
Because she said, I saw them over there. She didn't have to lead them. She could have been like, he went over there, right over there. Yeah. I saw him, and let them all disappear.
Run off. Yeah. Although, to be frank, I really don't think well on my feet in a blind panic. So I don't know what I would have done. I would have been like, look over here. I would have just been like some really badly thought out plan. And then somebody like you would have been like, why didn't you just do this? And I would have been like, oh, crap. So I don't know. But at any rate, now we're on board the Enterprise, and Dr. Barron of the archaeological team says that Picard should send the Mintalkans a sign. He's like, now there's this religion. They're referring to the god as the Picard, which I think is kind of funny. We don't want to upset the Picard. And Dr. Barron is like, look, like it or not, the Prime Directive has been broken into a zillion pieces and is now dust. That's one thing. Number two, they believe that you are a god, and they will create an entire religion around you. How Dr. Barron knows that is beyond me, because he's been beamed away for medical. I know, but he's been beamed away for medical attention. And all of this happened.
Oh, how does he know what's going on the planet?
Yeah. All of this has happened since he's left.
They're in the observation lounge. They must have informed him about what's going on, and maybe he can also hear the comms stuff.
Okay. Hearing the comms makes sense. We're just going to
assume he's in on everything.
I should hope so. But Picard is refusing to play God, and he does say, Dr. Barron does say, like it or not, you've created a religion which is going to create rules and like belief system, and like we have forever altered the Mintalkans' society right now because of all of this. And Picard is like, I will not play God. They think I'm a magician, but I'm going to show them how the magic is made. And his second option is to beam Nuria aboard, which is Liko's wife, I assume, or like the leader of the society. I thought we were having this whole Prime Directive talk like 2 seconds ago, and now you're trying to pull the justice move and just beam this woman aboard and show her your fucking ship and the planet and everything. Like, wait a second.
So this bothered me because, first of all, Picard has this really impassioned speech about the importance of the Prime Directive.
Thank you.
I just didn't buy it at all. I was like, you have routinely broken the Prime Directive on just about every episode we've had. So this passionate speech about its importance is just really ill-timed. It just feels like not authentic. Like I just can't buy that coming from you. And then he's like, I'm not going to play God. That's not, I'm not going to show myself to the Mintalkans. That's going to contaminate them even further. So instead, let's beam another one on board.
Yeah, here's an idea. Let's pull a justice move and just beam one on board. Yeah, that was so...
that is a horrible decision, because you're just exposing even more of them. We've already exposed Liko, and look what happened with that.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a terrible idea. Turns out it was fine. Like in the end of the episode, it was fine. But yeah, and like I think there's an episode in season 7 where they do something similar and they beam aliens on board, but it's unavoidable in this case. And when the alien sees the ship and it's like so far beyond their technology, they're kind of like caveman era. And that alien kills himself because he can't really live with what he's seen. and go back to his people and pretend.
Yeah, that sounds
Remember that?
vaguely familiar. Yes.
He can't go back to his people and pretend like he never saw what he saw.
Yes.
And they like can't erase his memory or something. So he just kills himself ceremonially. And it's
yes,
like,
he like kills
damaging.
himself in his sleep or something. Yeah, something like that.
It's very damaging. So I thought this was a terrible idea, but the writers fixed it so that it was a fine idea and it all worked out.
Agreed. So he beams Nuria aboard. And he does have this like kind of beautifully written speech about humans past and Mintonkin's past and how he's not a god. And he actually did a good thing where he was like, imagine you met someone who didn't know what a bow was. What would she think of that? Right. And so he finally kind of gets around to this woman, but she does request that he bring several people back from the dead and doesn't believe Picard when he says he can't do that. And so he's like, God damn it. I thought I'd just gotten through to you. And I now realize I haven't. So he takes Nuria to sickbay where one of the archaeologists is succumbing to her injuries. And Nuria sees this and she's like, oh shit. Okay. So you can't control death. You can just heal injuries better than we can, but you still don't have a monopoly over death. But that wasn't the thing that stood out to me. Shereese, the thing that stood out to me was this poor woman is dying and like gasping for air and on her last breath. And the medic on duty that's above her has the worst bedside manner I have ever seen in my life. He's on a pad. He's just tapping things and casually looking at her. And he's actually looking at her like he had a date with someone and like someone else called in sick and he has to cover this shift. And he's fucking pissed that he has to cover this shift. So this woman is an inconvenience on his life. That's what this dude looked like. I was like, who the hell thought that this would be a good look? This dude was looking annoyed. And then when she dies, he was like, beep, boop, beep, boop. Ugh, whatever. All right. I'm going to the next patient. Like, not even like, and she's got people there that are surrounding her that like have worked with her and stuff. So they're all sad, right? So it's like, you would think the appropriate thing to do is put on like a sad face at least and be like, I'm so sorry. No, he was like, beep, boop, beep, boop. Ugh. Are you still here? Like, so. If you have not seen this episode, that alone is worth checking out. It was the worst bedside manner I've ever seen on a doctor in my life, honestly.
So I have to say, I didn't notice that guy at all. And that's a lot of backstory you just gave him right now. I did not even notice this med tech standing there. But what I did notice was that when Beverly Crusher goes to give her the hypo spray, she hypo sprays her in the chest. And I was like, oh yeah. And I was like, huh?
I was so pissed about the medic
for so many reasons. Because I was like going through her clothes and her neck is 2 inches north of where you shot her. I don't get that. And then she died anyway.
So I was pissed about the medic that I completely missed that part.
Perspective.
Yeah.
So she dies. And then Nuria's like, okay, you don't have the power over life and death. So, because I'm guessing after his impassioned speech to her, she was maybe thinking they're all gods, like they all have special powers.
Yeah.
And then when she saw that, she was like, oh, okay. So wait, you do have limits. There's limits. You do have powers that we don't understand, but there's limits to your powers. So you're not as cool as I thought. Okay. I think I sort of get it now. So Picard's like, great. And then he beams to the planet. And I was like, wasn't he just saying, I won't beam to this planet. They can't see me. If I'm exposed to them, I'll contaminate, blah, 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 blah. And then like, he's like, hey, everybody, I'm Picard. I was like, what? But I get that he was coming for a different reason. He wasn't coming with his 10 commandments. He was coming to be like, hey, I'm just a regular person. But he literally just said he wasn't going to go down there. So I was just like, he doesn't know what's going on right now.
No, it was basically like, hey, Picard, you should go down to the planet. No, I will never, ever do that. Here's an idea. Let's beam someone aboard from the planet who doesn't understand any of this technology. And then I'm going to beam down with her. It's like, oh, okay. Backing up just a little bit. I do actually really think that Nuria, the actress who played Nuria, did a fabulous job when they brought her on board, because they beamed her into a transporter room. And just the look of the room freaked her out. And then little things like the doors opening and closing on their own, she was like, right? Because if you were from a society that is that primitive, little things you take for granted, like the doors opening and closing, would blow your mind. It would. And I thought that was really cool. It's like, okay.
And she said that too. She was like, even the doors obey your thoughts.
Exactly.
Like, that is what it looks like.
It totally looks like that. So yes. Okay. So going forward a little bit. So Picard does beam down with Nuria and they try reasoning with Liko, who is having a blind panic about what to do to please the Picard. And this is something that I thought bothers me about religion. When people are trying to please their God, it could be anything or nothing, right? Where it's like, you're just searching to grasp at straws for like, this would please my God, or that would please my, it's like, how would you know? You can't comprehend, it's like Liko trying to comprehend this mythical, the Picard. And he's like, maybe we should shoot Troy. That would please the Picard. Or maybe keeping her alive would please the Picard. Or maybe throwing her into the cold would please the Picard. It's like any of these things could or couldn't please the Picard. So that's, to me, I was like, okay, this is sometimes when I see people who could be classified at times as like extremists trying to please their God. And it's like, yeah, again, like you don't know either of these options could or could not please them. So how would you know? I don't know.
Yeah. And that's the role of religious text, because it usually gives guidance on what to do and what not to do. And then the challenge comes when people interpret that guidance. So sacrifice to deities is common in many, many, many religions. And then it's the interpretation of what does sacrifice look like? Does sacrifice look like giving your best? Does it look like giving your time? Does it look like giving your money? Does it look like killing people and cutting out their hearts? Like, what does sacrifice look like? And it gets interpreted differently based on just whoever's reading it, really. But it tends to be the things that we remember are the really violent acts of sacrifice that are, like you said, very extreme, because no one's going to notice the person who sacrifices like a little vial of oil, which is like a really famous story in the Bible. This woman who sacrificed some oil, but it was really expensive oil. And so it's like giving your best, right? But we do remember like the Aztecs or Mayans, I don't remember which one it was, but like cutting out people's hearts and like burning it or whatever, like we do remember that, because you're like, holy cow, like that's a lot. Like that's, murdering another human. That's so big. And I agree with you that the guessing game is not helpful, and it's stressful. It's frustrating to everybody. And it almost always ends up being something bad. Like it's always, it comes to this point where somebody's being harmed or killed or something, because the idea, I think, we used to talk about this when I was in Bible study. People have this idea of God being this like divine genie. Where it's like 3 wishes, and then like, what can you do to like manipulate the genie to give you your 3 wishes? And that's what sacrifices behave like. Like that's how people treat sacrifices, is like, you have to do something really extreme to get something really extreme. So Liko's thinking the Picard's going to drown us all in this storm because he's pissed that we lost Palmer. So we've got to do something equally extreme, which is killing Troy. So that's why it's like it's like one-upsmanship with God, which is crazy. And then he almost kills the Picard, which is also crazy. Like, if this is your God, why would you try to shoot him in the chest?
Oh my God, yes. Yeah, because
it makes sense, because he's just like, bring back my wife, somebody bring back my wife. And he's just swallowed up in grief at this point.
Yeah, he really is. And the actor who played Liko did a great job too, of that like indecision mixed with that panic of like, we have to do something, and we have to do something big, because these thunderstorms are going to kill us all, or and the floods are going to kill us all.
Everyone else is like, I don't know what we should do. And he's like, I do. Give me that bow.
Yes.
And I thought to myself, why is everybody standing around Troy if she's about to be like,
that's what I thought. I was like, gun safety 101. You do not stand downrange, you idiots. Like, I was like, how about if we all just crowd around her and hope you're a good shot? Like, right? I thought that thing too, where I was like,
right, where's your firing range? Where they stand out in the open, far away from other people and property. Like, this plan seems not well thought out.
No, and it's like, inside a house too, so you're gonna hit a hole in the wall. Yeah, I was like, all of this is just bad.
Have a pool of blood running down the stairs. Like, it's just not, this whole thing is not well thought out. Yeah, that actor was so good. He actually plays, like, when I was watching, I was like, I know this guy. Where do I know this guy from? And he's been in a million things, but what I remember him the most from is he plays this character called Arturus on Star Trek Voyager. And he's also like this really desperate character. He's really like, he seems really nice, but he's actually deceiving them, and he's trying to feed all of them to the Borg because of something that Voyager did. The Borg came and conquered his system and destroyed all of his people. So he's got this huge revenge plot, and he's like kidnaps the captain and only one other crew member, 7 of 9, and is taking them back to the Borg and the Enterprise, and Voyager is chasing after them. And like, it's such a good episode. And I was like, oh man, this guy is so good. So yeah, I did love the indecision and seeing him just stressed out and wanting his wife back. And that's really where all this motivation was coming from. And you brought me back to life. Can't you bring her back to life? Or just switch us, just exchange, bring her back and just let me go. And you see his daughter just being like, wait, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah. Like, hold on a second now.
Hold on there. No one needs to die right now. But again, all was well. He ends up shooting his own god, which I guess is a metaphor in there because they immediately abandoned their religion.
Yep.
Right after this.
Yeah.
You're like, well, it's that was fun. One religion.
All right. Well, back to taking sun measurements. Yeah. So yes, Picard does try reasoning with Liko, who in a blind panic about what to do, ends up shooting Picard with a bow and arrow and hits him in the shoulder. And that's the end of that religion. You're absolutely right. And Liko does the thing that everybody does when they accidentally hurt somebody with a firearm is they drop the firearm and they're like, what have I done? It's like, yeah, that's why you don't fucking play with firearms.
Yeah.
And Beverly patches him up quickly, immediately, because it's a hole in his shoulder, which whatever, that's like easy to fix in the 24th century. And the next time we see Picard, he's again down on the planet's surface saying goodbye to the Mintonkans and wearing a sling, which I was like, oh, okay. I remember in season 2, he had open heart surgery and he was in recovery for 4 hours and that was it. Why is he wearing a sling like the next day? Doesn't make any damn sense whatsoever. I was like, and they already know about the Enterprise and they already know about, it's like, oh, you guys have like crazy future technology. So you could show up without a sling and being like, yes, our doctor used our future technology and like healed me up. I'm good. Why are you wearing
even
a sling?
With a sling? They probably don't even have slings. Either.
Exactly. So
yeah,
come on now.
I didn't think about that until right now when you said that. Why does he have a sling? What's the purpose of that? Because he should have been completely healed.
It took him 4 hours to recover from open heart surgery. And then he was like back at the gym again the next day. So it's like, you don't need a sling. Anyway, so he shows them in Tompkins the duck blind and tells them that they'll be observing them to learn more about themselves. Because he's like, learning about you helps us learn about our past because our people are very similar. Which immediately made me trigger 2 thoughts. I would move the fuck out of there immediately, knowing that people are watching me.
No. He said, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and then I thought, if this can be disguised so expertly, I would be paranoid about anywhere I went, people would be watching, which I'm like, I don't want that. I don't want that.
Yeah, definitely. So what he said was, this is where we were, but we're shutting this whole thing down.
Oh, okay.
So he was going to have Geordi dismantle the entire duck blind, but he had him like show it to them first and then like hide it again. And then they were going to dismantle the duck blind and the anthropologists were going to move on because now their whole, like all their research is over because the subjects are now aware of their presence. So now it's not going to work.
Okay.
So they said they're leaving, they're going to leave them alone and all that other stuff. But here's where we were and we were watching you and here's what was going on. But I agree. Like I wouldn't necessarily trust that they really were leaving. Because how would I know? You just made that thing disappear. And yeah, it could be like any bush or tree now. It could be a duck blind.
Exactly. That I would just feel so paranoid. Probably, yeah. It's probably best to be like, hey, we're leaving now and let's blow up the rock just to be extra sure.
That's what I thought he was going to do when he was like, LaForge, please. I thought it was going to like blow up. And that would have just, for me, I would have been like, okay, that blind is gone.
Yeah.
But he just like showed it to them and was like, see, that's where we were hiding. Okay, we're good. And then it just went back away. I was like, wait, should
have just left.
But I guess, I mean, and even thinking about them recovering their technology piece by piece, I mean, all that stuff just blew up anyways. So like, right. It like all fried inside and you could just keep it.
Yeah. Also, you guys have replicators. You could just replicate fresh technology, whatever. It's not.
Yeah, it's not like they need it. I think they need to keep it from the Mintakans because that's like not their. It's not time for that.
They're not ready for that.
But yeah, I thought they were going to blow it up, and maybe that's not a good idea. Having like technology shrapnel all over the mountain might also be a problem.
Yeah, because there's bound to be a phaser somewhere in there, and then that's going to like trigger the next. Yeah, exactly.
Next Civil War or something.
Exactly.
Bow and arrow versus phaser.
Right. Advantage phaser. All right. On that note, thank you for geeking out with us. Next week, we are talking season 3, episode 5, The Bonding. Shereese, I love doing this with you, and I really look forward to breaking down next week's episode.
Yeah, it's going to be super fun. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.